Midnight rain hammered my pickup truck like bullets against steel. I sat in my own driveway, engine off, listening to the muffled voices bleeding through the walls of what used to be our home. 23 years of marriage, and it had come to this, hiding in my truck like some kind of stalker, afraid to walk into my own house. The front door light flickered, casting shadows across the cracked concrete. Through the living room window, I could see my wife Marta pacing back and forth, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing wildly. Our daughter Jessica sat on the couch, arms crossed, that look of teenage disgust plastered across her face. I knew what they were talking about. Me. How I'd embarrassed the family again. How I wasn't good enough for Marta's new circle of high society friends. How my little auto repair shop was dragging down her image as the rising star at Blackstone PR. Face it, Dad's a loser, Jessica's voice carried through the thin walls. Mom needs someone who can actually keep up with her success. Someone like Uncle Derek. Uncle Derek. My stomach churned. Derek wasn't really Jessica's uncle. He was Marta's younger brother, 38 years old, and everything I apparently wasn't. Slick hair, expensive suits, real estate empire, and a Tesla that cost more than I made in 6 months. Marta's voice rose higher. Your father had his chance, Jess. 23 years of chances, but I'm done being held back by someone who thinks changing oil is a career. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The rain kept falling, each drop feeling like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. That's when I saw Derek's Tesla pull into our driveway. He stepped out like he owned the place, not even bothering to run through the rain. His $1,000 suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He walked right up to my front door and let himself in without knocking. Like family. I watched through the window as Marta's face lit up. She actually ran to him, threw her arms around his neck like some lovesick teenager. Derek whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. The kind of laugh she used to save for me, back when I was worth laughing with. Jessica jumped up from the couch, all smiles now. Uncle Derek, did you bring the college brochures? Of course, sweetheart. Only the best schools for my favorite niece. He handed her a stack of glossy pamphlets. I've already spoken to some admissions directors. The Morrison name carries weight. Morrison. His last name. Not mine. Not the name Jessica had carried for 18 years. That's when Marta looked right at the window. Right at me, sitting in my truck like some pathetic voyeur. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Disgust. She walked over and yanked the curtains closed. I sat there for another hour, watching the rain turn to sleet, thinking about how we'd gotten here. Marta had started at Blackstone PR as a secretary 15 years ago. I'd been proud of her, encouraged her to take night classes, supported her when she worked late. I'd even taken out a second mortgage to pay for her MBA. Now she made 6 figures. I made maybe 30,000 on a good year. She said, I earn more, so I make the rules. I muttered to myself, wiping condensation off the inside of the windshield. I smiled. You're right. Because she was right. In today's world, money was power. And I had neither. But sitting there in the dark, watching Derek's shadow move around my living room, something clicked. A plan started forming in my head. It was crazy, maybe even stupid, but it was something. If money made the rules, then maybe it was time to change the game entirely. I started the truck and drove to the only place that still felt like home, Flanagan's boxing gym on the south side of town. The neon sign flickered, open 24 hours, in electric blue letters. Inside, the familiar smell of sweat, leather, and determination hit me like a warm embrace. Tommy! Frankie Flanagan looked up from the heavy bag he was working. At 55, he was still built like a brick wall. What brings you out this late, buddy? Marriage trouble, I said, unwrapping my hands. Need to hit something. Frankie nodded. He'd been through 3 divorces himself. Heavy bag's all yours, but Tommy... He paused, studying my face. Don't go hitting the bag angry. That's how you break bones. Hit it smart. Smart. That was the key word. I spent the next 2 hours working the bag, thinking through every detail of what my life had become. Marta's promotion to senior vice president, Derek's real estate empire, Jessica's college applications to schools I could never afford, my friends who'd slowly stopped calling once Marta started moving in higher circles. By the time I left the gym, I had a plan. It wasn't about getting even. It was about getting smart. 3 days later, I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Honda when my world shifted again. The radio was playing some talk show about successful women in business, and I was half listening while replacing her brake pads. Today's guest is Marta Sullivan, Senior VP at Blackstone PR, the host announced. Marta's been making waves in our community, representing some of the biggest names in New England real estate. I dropped my wrench. Thank you for having me, Patricia. Marta's voice filled the garage. Professional, confident, nothing like the woman who used to laugh at my stupid jokes. I've been fortunate to work with some incredible clients, including my brother-in-law, Derek Morrison of Morrison Real Estate. Brother-in-law, not brother. Brother-in-law. The interview continued, but I couldn't focus on the words. Something was wrong with that statement. Derek was Marta's brother, not her brother-in-law. Unless... I wiped my hands on my coveralls and pulled out my phone. A quick search brought up Derek Morrison's real estate website. Professional headshots, client testimonials, and a bio that made my blood run cold. Derek Morrison, 38, specializes in luxury lakefront properties. A lifelong bachelor, Derek brings a personal touch to every transaction. Lifelong bachelor, not Marta's brother. I scrolled through his social media, my hands shaking. Photos of Derek at charity galas, Derek at real estate conferences, Derek with his arm around various women at various events. And there, from just 2 weeks ago, a photo that made everything clear. Derek and Marta at the Lakeside Country Club, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing at some private joke. The caption read, "Celebrating another successful quarter with my business partner." Business partner. I stared at that photo for a long time, pieces clicking into place. The late nights Marta claimed were work meetings. The new clothes, the expensive jewelry she said were gifts from grateful clients. The way she'd started criticizing everything about me, from my clothes to my job to my friends. She wasn't just moving up in the world. She was moving away from me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Dad, can you pick me up from school? Mom's in meetings all day with Uncle Derek." Uncle Derek. The lie was so casual, so practiced, that Jessica probably believed it herself. I closed up the shop early and drove to the high school, my mind racing. During the drive home, Jessica chattered about her college applications, about how Uncle Derek was going to help her get into prestigious schools, about how excited she was to finally have someone in the family who understood success. "He's nothing like you, Dad," she said, not meaning to be cruel, but landing the blow anyway. "He's got vision. He's got ambition. He's going places." "Where exactly is he going?" I asked. "Everywhere. He just bought this amazing lakefront house. He's taking Mom and me to see it this weekend. He says I can have pool parties there when I'm home from college." Lakefront house? New house. That explained where some of Marta's money was going. That evening, I waited until Marta was in the shower, then did something I'd never done in 23 years of marriage. I looked through her phone. The password was Derek's birthday. Of course it was. The text messages told the whole story. Months of them, going back to last winter. It started professional enough, meeting times, client discussions, strategy sessions. But by spring, the tone had changed. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Tom's working late again. The lakefront house is perfect. Our little secret. Jessica loves the idea of having an uncle who can provide for her future. Tom's so clueless. Sometimes I think he deserves what's coming." What's coming? I scrolled back through months of messages, seeing my marriage dissolve in real time. They'd been planning this for months. The house, Jessica's college fund, even the divorce papers that Derek's lawyer had apparently already drawn up. I took screenshots of everything, my hands surprisingly steady. Then, I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, and went downstairs to wait. Marta came down 20 minutes later, hair perfect, makeup flawless, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. "Working late again?" I asked. "Client dinner," she said without looking at me. "Don't wait up. Say hello to Derek for me." She froze halfway to the door. What? Derek, your business partner, your brother-in-law, your whatever he is this week. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw fear in her eyes, then anger, then something cold and calculating. I don't know what you think you know, Tom, but I know enough. I held up my phone, showing her one of the screenshots. I know about the house. I know about the college fund. I know about the lawyer. Marta's face went white, then red. You went through my phone? You used Derek's birthday as your password. Not very subtle. She stood there for a long moment, and I could see her weighing options. Deny everything? Come clean? Attack? She chose attack. Fine, she said, her voice turning to ice. You want the truth? Derek and I are together. We have been for months. And you know what, Tom? I'm not sorry. I'm finally with someone who can give me the life I deserve. What about Jessica? Jessica will be fine. Better than fine. Derek's already set up a college fund for her. He's going to adopt her after the divorce. Adopt her. My daughter. The child I'd raised, coached in softball, taught to drive, walked through every scraped knee and broken heart. She's my daughter. She's 18, Tom. Old enough to choose. And she's already chosen. Marta grabbed her purse. Derek earns more in a month than you do in a year. He can give her opportunities you never could. He can give us both the life we deserve. She headed for the door, then turned back. I earn more than you now, Tom. I make the rules. And the rule is, this marriage is over. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in the house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. I sat in my chair for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. About rules and money and who deserved what. About Jessica calling another man uncle and planning pool parties at his lakefront house. Then I smiled. You're right, Marta, I said to the empty room. You do make the rules. But every game has more than one player. The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of running Sullivan's Auto Repair. I called in sick. Instead, I drove to the Lakeside Country Club where Derek and Marta had been photographed. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, Lexuses, and one familiar Tesla with the license plate Sold One. Derek's car. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30, they emerged from the clubhouse, Marta laughing at something Derek had whispered in her ear. She looked radiant, younger somehow, like she'd shed 20 years along with her wedding ring. They got into Derek's Tesla and drove north toward the Lake District where million-dollar homes dotted the shoreline like scattered jewels. I followed at a distance, my beat-up pickup truck invisible among the construction vehicles and service vans that kept these estates running. The house was everything Jessica had described and more. Modern glass and steel, jutting out over the water, with an infinity pool that seemed to blend into the lake itself. Derek's Tesla pulled into a circular driveway that probably cost more than my annual income. I parked on the road and watched them walk through the front door like they owned the place, which, apparently, Derek did. My phone rang. Jessica. Dad? Mom said you were sick. Are you okay? Just a headache, sweetheart. Nothing serious. Good, because I wanted to tell you about the house. Uncle Derek showed me pictures. It's incredible. There's a game room and a home theater, and my own bedroom with a lake view. Your own bedroom. At Derek's house, where you'd live after he adopted you. That sounds amazing, Jess. He says I can invite friends over anytime. Can you imagine? Pool parties with a view like that? I could imagine. I could imagine my daughter growing up in that house, calling Derek Dad, bringing her future husband to meet her stepfather. I could imagine myself becoming a footnote in her life, the guy who used to fix cars before Mom married someone successful. Dad, you still there? Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here. Are you sure you're okay? You sound weird. Just tired. Listen, Jess, I want you to know that whatever happens, I love you. You're the best thing I ever did with my life. Dad, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly the way it should be. I hung up and sat there looking at Derek's perfect house, thinking about rules and power and who really controlled the game. Then I drove to the bank. I'd like to close our joint checking account, I told the teller. I'll need both account holders present for that, she said. What about removing my direct deposit? That you can do yourself. I filled out the paperwork, redirecting my paychecks to a new account at a different bank. It wasn't much money, but it was mine. Every dollar I'd been contributing to the household expenses, to Jessica's college fund, to the joint account that Derek and Marta were probably already planning to drain. Next stop, the insurance company. I want to remove my wife from my auto insurance policy when I told the agent. Any particular reason? She's got her own car, her own income. Time she took responsibility for her own coverage. That afternoon, I went through every joint account, every shared expense, every financial tie that bound me to Marta's new life. Cable, electric, water, trash pickup. If my name was on it, I removed it. If my money was paying for it, I stopped the payments. By 5 o'clock, Marta Morrison, soon to be her legal name, I was sure, was financially on her own. I was sitting in my garage when she came home, Derek's Tesla following her into the driveway. They both got out, and I could see from their body language that they'd been arguing. Tom! Marta stormed into the garage, Derek trailing behind her like an expensive shadow. What the hell did you do? Nothing illegal, I said, not looking up from the engine I was rebuilding. Just exercised my rights as an account holder. I can't just what? Remove my own direct deposit? Cancel insurance on my own car? Stop paying for services I don't use? Derek stepped forward, trying to look intimidating in his perfect suit. Look, Tom, I think we all want what's best for everyone here. I finally looked up. Derek was handsome in that artificial way that money could buy. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect tan. Everything I wasn't. Derek Morrison, I said. Marta's brother-in-law. Except you're not married, are you? Which would make you her brother. Except Marta doesn't have a brother. Which makes you her boyfriend, Derek said, lifting his chin, and soon to be her husband. Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy together. Marta blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. That's it? That's all you have to say? What else is there? You make the rules, remember? You earn more, so you're in charge. I'm just a guy who fixes cars. Tom, Derek said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone successful people used with the help. I want you to know there are no hard feelings here. Marta and I, what we have is special. But that doesn't mean we can't all be adults about this. Adults, I repeated. Exactly. In fact, I'd like to offer you a job. Morrison Real Estate is expanding, and we could use someone to maintain our fleet vehicles. Good pay, steady hours, benefits. A job. Working for the man who was stealing my wife and adopting my daughter. That's very generous, I said. I like to take care of people, Derek said, especially family. Family. The word hung in the air like smoke. I'll think about it, I said. That seemed to satisfy them. They left together, probably to celebrate their victory at some expensive restaurant I'd never be able to afford. But I wasn't thinking about restaurants. I was thinking about Derek's offer and what it meant and how a man like him thought the world worked. He thought money solved everything. He thought success meant he could take whatever he wanted and offer consolation prizes to the people he stepped on. He thought he understood the rules. But Derek Morrison had never been poor. He'd never had to fight for everything he had. He'd never learned that sometimes the guy with nothing to lose is the most dangerous player in the game. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the screenshots from Marta's messages. Months of evidence. Names, dates, places, financial details. Derek Morrison was about to get an education in how the other half lived. And the tuition was going to cost him everything. I started with Derek's business. Morrison Real Estate had built its reputation on luxury lakefront properties and high-end commercial deals. Derek's client list read like a who's who of New England wealth. Doctors, lawyers, tech executives, old money families who'd been buying and selling prime real estate for generations. But every successful business has vulnerabilities, and Derek's was his ego. I spent a week researching his deals, using public records and online databases to map out his empire. Property transfers, mortgage records, business licenses. It was all there if you knew where to look, and had the patience to dig through the bureaucratic maze. What I found was interesting. Derek Morrison was leveraged to his eyeballs. The lakefront house where he was planning to play happy family with my wife and daughter, mortgaged for 90% of its value. The Tesla, leased. The expensive suits, the country club membership, the lifestyle that had so impressed Marta and Jessica, all built on credit and the assumption that the real estate market would keep booming forever. Derek Morrison was rich on paper and cash poor in reality. One bad quarter could bring down his entire empire. So I decided to give him a bad quarter. It started small. Anonymous tips to the Better Business Bureau about inflated property values. Calls to the State Real Estate Commission about potential ethics violations. Nothing illegal, nothing that couldn't be traced back to legitimate concerns from concerned citizens. But Derek's real weakness wasn't his business practices. It was his clients. Rich people didn't like uncertainty. They didn't like their real estate agent being investigated, even if the investigations went nowhere. They especially didn't like their agent's personal life becoming public knowledge. That's where Marta's text messages became useful. I created anonymous email accounts and started reaching out to Derek's biggest clients. Not with threats or accusations, but with questions. Innocent questions about whether they knew their agent was involved in a messy, extramarital affair, whether they were comfortable working with someone who was breaking up a family, whether Morrison Real Estate really represented the kind of values they wanted associated with their investments. The response was swift and predictable. 3 clients canceled major deals within a week. 2 more put their listings on hold. The local business journal ran a small item about Morrison Real Estate facing challenges in the current market. Derek's perfect world started developing cracks. Meanwhile, I was dealing with my own problems. Jessica had stopped speaking to me after I'd missed her senior awards ceremony. I'd been at the courthouse, filing papers to protect my assets from the coming divorce. Marta had moved into Derek's house temporarily, claiming she needed space to think. My friends from the neighborhood started avoiding me. Word had gotten around that Marta was leaving me for a successful businessman, and in their minds, that made me a failure. A cautionary tale about what happened when you didn't keep up with your wife's ambitions. The only place I still felt welcome was Flanagan's gym. "You look like hell," Frankie said, watching me work the heavy bag with more anger than technique. "Feel worse," I admitted. "Want to talk about it?" I told him everything. The affair, the house, Jessica's college fund, Derek's job offer. Frankie listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or grunting his understanding. "So, what's your play?" he asked when I finished. "I'm working on it." "Tom," Frankie's voice was serious. "I've seen a lot of guys go through divorces, the ones who try to get revenge. They usually end up destroying themselves more than their ex-wives. This isn't about revenge." "No? Then what's it about?" I thought about that question while I showered and changed. What was it about? Justice? Pride? The need to prove that Derek Morrison couldn't just take whatever he wanted without consequences. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was about showing Jessica that her father wasn't the failure everyone thought he was. That success wasn't just about money and houses and college funds. That night, I got a call from my old friend Mike Henderson. We'd been buddies since high school, served as each other's best men, coached Little League together when our kids were young. "Tom, we need to talk." "What's up, Mike?" "Can you meet me at Brennan's tonight?" Brennan's was our usual hangout, a working-class bar where the beer was cheap and the conversation was honest. I found Mike in our regular booth, nursing a whiskey and looking uncomfortable. "This is awkward," he started. "Let me guess. Marta called you?" "She called Linda, asked her to talk to you about the divorce." Linda was Mike's wife and one of Marta's closest friends, or former friends. It was hard to keep track of alliances in a divorce. What did Linda say? That you're being unreasonable, that Derek's a good guy who's trying to do right by everyone, that you should take his job offer and move on with your life. I took a long drink of beer. "What do you think?" Mike was quiet for a moment. "I think Marta's always been ambitious, and I think you knew that when you married her." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got, Tom. Look, I like you. We've been friends for 20 years. But Marta's moved on. Maybe it's time you did too." "Moved on to what? A job working for the guy who stole my wife?" "A job that pays twice what you're making now. Benefits, steady hours." "Tom, you're 45 years old. How many more chances are you going to get?" The conversation went downhill from there. By the time I left Brennan's, I'd lost another friend to Derek Morrison's version of success. But I'd also gained something. Clarity. Mike was right about one thing. I was 45 years old, and chances were running out. Not chances for jobs or money or respectability, chances to prove that there was more than one way to win. Derek Morrison thought he'd won because he had the house, the money, the girl. He thought success was about accumulation, collecting assets, including other people's families. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the guy he was replacing. The next morning, I drove to Morrison Real Estate's office in the financial district. Glass and steel, marble floors, expensive art on the walls. Derek's kingdom. The receptionist, a young woman who probably made more than I did, looked at me like I was lost. "I'm here to see Derek Morrison," I said. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him Tom Sullivan is here about his job offer." 5 minutes later, Derek appeared, all smiles and expensive cologne. "Tom, great to see you. Come on back to my office." His office was everything mine wasn't. Corner view, leather furniture, awards, and certificates covering the walls. A shrine to success. "So," Derek said, settling behind his massive desk, "have you thought about my offer?" "I have." "And?" I looked around the office, at the symbols of everything Derek had achieved, everything he thought made him better than me. "I accept," I said. Derek's smile widened. "Excellent. I think you're going to be very happy here, Tom. We take care of our people." "I'm sure you do." We shook hands, and I could see the satisfaction in Derek's eyes. He'd won completely now. The house, the wife, the daughter, and the husband working for him like a grateful servant. Derek Morrison had everything he wanted, which made what came next so much sweeter. Working for Derek Morrison was like getting a masterclass in arrogance. Every morning, I'd arrive at Morrison Real Estate at 7 to service the company vehicles. Derek drove the Tesla, but the business owned 3 luxury SUVs for client tours, plus a maintenance van that was now technically my responsibility. Derek would arrive around 9, usually with Marta. They'd walk past me like I was part of the furniture, discussing their plans for the day, their weekend at the lake house, Jessica's college interviews at schools I could never afford. "Tom's working out well," I heard Derek tell a client one morning. "Sometimes you have to give people a second chance, you know? Help them find their place in the world. Their place in the world." Like I was a charity case he'd rescued from the streets. But working inside Derek's business gave me access to something I'd never had before. Information. Client files, financial records, upcoming deals. It was all there in the office, protected by nothing more than Derek's assumption that the help couldn't read. I had keys to everything, access to the computer system for scheduling maintenance, and most importantly, I was invisible. Rich people didn't notice the guy who changed their oil. What I discovered was that Derek's empire was even more precarious than I'd suspected. He was juggling 3 major deals, each one dependent on the others, closing successfully. If any one of them fell through, the whole structure would collapse like a house of cards. The biggest deal was a commercial development on the North Shore, a $50 million project that would make Derek's reputation and set him up for life. The client was Harrison Industries, a family-owned manufacturing company looking to relocate their headquarters. The Harrisons were old-school New England money, the kind of people who valued tradition, family, and moral character above flashy presentations and expensive suits. They were also the kind of people who would be very interested in Derek's personal life. I started small. A casual conversation with Mrs. Harrison when she came to the office for a meeting. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, holding the elevator door. "You're Mrs. Harrison, right? I'm Tom, the maintenance guy." "Oh, hello, Tom. Nice to meet you." "Likewise. I hope you don't mind me saying, but it's refreshing to meet a family that still believes in traditional values." "Not everyone does these days," she smiled. "Well, that's very kind of you to say. I mean, take my situation. 23 years of marriage, and my wife leaves me for my boss. Can you believe that? And now I'm working for the guy who broke up my family." Mrs. Harrison's smile faded. "Oh my, I'm so sorry. It's okay. Mr. Morrison says it's just business. Nothing personal." The elevator reached her floor, and Mrs. Harrison stepped out looking troubled. 3 days later, Harrison Industries pulled out of the deal. Derek was furious, calling emergency meetings, demanding explanations from his staff. But the Harrisons were polite but firm. They'd decided to go with a different agent, someone who better represented their company values. One domino down. The second deal involved a luxury resort development, and the investors were a group of doctors who'd been friends since medical school, professional men who'd built their success on reputation and trust. I happened to be servicing their car when they came for a site visit. Gentlemen, I said, wiping my hands on my coveralls, beautiful day for looking at property? Indeed it is, Dr. Peterson, the lead investor, replied. You work for Morrison Real Estate? I do. Great company. Very modern in their approach to business. Modern how? Well, take Mr. Morrison. He's dating a married woman, planning to adopt her daughter, but he still hired the husband to work for him. Takes a modern man to pull that off. Dr. Peterson's eyebrows went up. Excuse me? Oh, I'm the husband, I said cheerfully. Tom Sullivan. Derek's having an affair with my wife, but hey, he gave me a job, so no hard feelings, right? The doctors exchanged glances. Dr. Peterson cleared his throat. That's quite a situation. Derek says, it's just business, nothing personal. The resort deal died the next week. 2 dominoes down. But the third deal was the biggest and the most personal. Derek was representing both sides of a transaction, selling a lakefront mansion for an elderly widow while simultaneously helping a tech executive buy his dream home. It was also completely illegal. Dual representation without disclosure was a violation of state real estate law, and I had emails proving Derek knew it. He was double dipping on commissions, collecting fees from both buyer and seller while pretending to represent their interests fairly. I could have reported him to the state licensing board, but that would have taken months to investigate. I had a better idea. I called both clients directly. Mrs. Chen, this is Tom Sullivan from Morrison Real Estate. I'm calling about your house sale. Yes, ma'am, I know it's unusual for maintenance staff to call, but I thought you should know that Mr. Morrison is also representing the buyer. No, ma'am, he didn't disclose that. Well, that's interesting because I have emails where he discusses getting double commissions. Yes, ma'am, I think you should call your lawyer too. The tech executive was even more upset when he learned he was paying premium prices, while his agent was secretly working for the seller. Both clients fired Derek the same day, 3 dominoes down. Bye.